Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, the journey to becoming a conscious man. Hey all, Stephen here, and welcome to episode 58 of the Unearthed Man Podcast. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Tyler. I loved his insights on making conscious choices in life. Now, I had the privilege last night to drive down the south coast of Victoria and check out a remarkable natural occurrence in the ocean. The waves were lit up as if someone had installed a set of LED lights that triggered every time a wave broke against the shoreline. Then as the water rolled up the beach under your feet, it was again as if someone had installed movement-activated LED lights in the sand. So as you moved your feet up and down, these lights started to glow in the sand. Now, this natural phenomenon is called bioluminescence. It occurs when algae spores in the ocean. During the day, you can see the pink algae, which turns luminescent blue at nighttime. Now, while standing there in awe at the beauty of nature, I could not help but think about this event and what that would have meant to the traditional custodians of land and what ceremonies this may have triggered based on the natural occurring event. Now, that's why I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this unceded land and pay respect to the elders past, present, due to the fact that they would have seen this as an event and actually called everyone together. So I respect that what we're seeing now has gone on for thousands and thousands of years. Now, as a quick thing, don't forget to share the love with our sponsor, Surf Coast Wellness Rooms, based in Torquay, Victoria, Australia. You know, as I said earlier, men, we spend much of our time looking after everyone else and caring for other people, and we don't spend time on our own self-care. So now you have an opportunity to change all that. Use the code TheUnearthedMan10 at the time of booking. You'll get a 10% discount on any of their services, including float tanks, infrared saunas, massages, and salt therapy. And because it's down near the beach, great way to go down, spend a day at the beach with the family. You duck off, have a bit of a therapy, and then come back. A quick few things to run through before we kick in with today's guest, who I'm super excited to be chatting with. First up, the Unearthed Man community. So it's made up of men willing to support and be supported by other men. It continues to grow. We've got 50 plus men now part of this active community, which is awesome. So if you are a man or know of a man who is seeking his tribe or his community, then please use the link in the show notes below to sign up. Alternatively, you can send me a message via any of my social media channels. Secondly, please subscribe to the podcast. I can't ask this enough. There's a lot of time and effort from myself and my guests that go into this. It literally will take you 2 minutes to jump on, give us a 5-star review and leave a bit of a comment. And the more 5-star reviews you get, the podcast goes up in the charts and this becomes more accessible to more men and more women across the world. So I'll ask you to jump on and do that. And the last one, if you are a man struggling with daily grind, have constant feelings of guilt, shame, or anxiety, or feeling irritated or frustrated, and you just feel that you've lost track of who you are and you've got that deeper inner feeling, there's got to be more to life than this, then I've got expressions of interest open at the moment for my 8-week men's empowerment program. Now, I only take 10 men in for every 8-week program. So if you're interested and you're going, it's time for me to actually take a step up and look at my life and do something completely different or get rid of this nagging feeling in my stomach, then jump on, click on the wait list below because it does actually fill up fast. Now, onto today's episode. My guest today describes himself as an emerging elder, reculturing the leaders of the Western world. He's intuitively tapped into a unique stream of ancient and emergent wisdom that is being called forward in these times. He moves in the world as a speaker, mentor, facilitator, and frontier community leader. Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, Matthew Liam Gardner. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Hey, Stephen. So nice to be here, mate. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It feels really special.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And as I spoke with Matthew a little bit earlier, I've watched his amazing journey, and as I've emerged, as most people have heard my stories, I've sort of come out and been more open and inquiry minded and everything else. I've just watched this great, journey as Matthew's. As you know, I see him as just standing in his true power and knowing exactly who he is as a man, and I get inspired by him. He calls a lot of other people into his world, but not as a way to actually share their skills and the medicine and the healing that they've got. And so as a leader, that's what he does around. So he's been on my list for probably the last year or so to reach out. And funny enough, he put up a post on Facebook, I think something about a podcast. And I'm like, mate, you got to jump on this one. So Matthew, great to have you on board. let's have a bit of a chat about your journey. So,
I'd love that. And I just want to say, mate, before we begin that, I really appreciate what you're doing in the world. I really appreciate hearing the introduction and hearing the love that you kind of being for the men of the world right now. It feels really important, and just honoring you and your work. It's a real joy to kind of look around and take in, my brothers who are really paving the new paths. So thank you.
No, thanks, man. I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you very much. So your journey, man, let's have a bit of a chat. What does it look like for you?
Well, what does it look like in these times? It's been, we're in the middle of a collective initiation right now. I think that everyone who's listening has worked that out. So it feels like, who a lot of us were 5 years ago is very different to the beings that we are today. That's what I experience when I sit down, eye to eye with people. And in these times, it feels like there's been a real speeding up of our personal evolutions. And, things are getting pretty wild out there, mate. It's getting more and more wild as time goes on. And I think it's going to keep on that same track. So for me, it's been a case of really, really learning to listen, really learning to listen to myself, really learning to listen to the other, or, the other beings that aren't myself, and beginning to slowly build a bit of a relationship with this great round rock that we have the great privilege of being the children and the custodians of all at once. And so, I've just been listening, mate. I've been listening a lot these last few years, really finding myself prepared to face the tension as I listen, of letting myself become something that, something new, something new in myself, letting myself become something that I wasn't just one season before. And so there's this it feels almost like a free fall in some ways, a free fall into everything I've always been, but haven't found its way into the surface of our world, And so, it's been such an incredible journey. That's been, it's like coming into full power while also being humbled to my knees all at once, And so that's the real human experience of these last couple of years. And I find myself constantly realizing more and more just how little I am. They say, some of the old sayings are that the more that you know, the more you realize, the less you know.
Yes,
you know that one? It's like, and there's something about coming deeper into my life, and just any human coming deeper into their life, where I feel like we almost have to start to soften some of the things that we had decided once upon a time were how this world works, and what it means to be a person, what it means to be a human being. And as we soften that, it's almost like the revelations can seep in through the cracks, the deeper understanding of what it is to be a human being, what it is to be a man, what it is to be alive in these times can kind of find its way through the cracks that we allow to open up in our being a little bit. When we kind of because the shells can be hard, brother. The armor over a lifetime can be thick. And so as I listen more, I'm just learning to open some cracks in that armor, let some of the deeper listenings through, and it's been a real adventure.
Awesome. I love that. So many things you've just touched through on there, but let's start with the armor. I know I had my armor broken open back into 2019. And it's such an enlightening experience when we go through that. And when we talk about that armor being broken, it's just understanding. I suppose it's like, because a lot of our listeners may not sit as deep in the spiritual spaces that we operate in, right? So I always try to bring it back into maybe a languaging for some of the listeners. And for me, it was like just learning to go, it's okay to have emotions. It's okay to actually tap, not hide the emotion, but when that emotion comes up, ask the question, what is it that you're asking me? Like, where's it coming from? And often when we do the communities or the different groups, we're not here to blow people apart. What we do, as you just said, we're just there to put a little crack. And often, it's that little crack is where that light shines in, and where that light shines in is where the magic is. And so it's being able to tap onto that. Let me double back a little bit to you spoke about the start, like a collective initiative. And yes, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, like the acceleration of this opening awareness, collective initiative starting to come in. So what's your definition of a collective initiative, and what do you see that looking like?
Yeah, it's a great question. A collective initiative. So the metaphor that there's a few metaphors I like to think of in regards to this, but one of them is that if you picture like us all a part of this kind of web, this kind of vast web that stretches over the world, and each of the points on the web, each of the little crossroads is one of us human beings. Mm-hmm. I feel that when enough of us move in one direction, that there is tension on the rest of the web. There's kind of like the web itself can kind of move and change shape. And so I see these collective initiatives as us on a larger and larger scales, learning how to dream together and learning how to be in this world together and learning how to create beauty or just good, solid supporting of life systems in this world, and systems, relationships, just anything that actually genuinely supports life. So I see these collective initiatives that I've done and that I see out in the world as it's almost like us practicing how to be on the earth together and just tentatively beginning to see what we're capable of, see what we can dream into existence. And you'll notice that a lot of the initiatives, mine and others, they come, they have their moment of their peak moment, and then they'll drift kind of off again and come to a close, and it's almost like a wave, it kind of these rhythmic, and each one there's more learning, and each one we get a little closer to what's true and what's life-giving. And sometimes, ever so often, if the moon is blue, there's an initiative that sticks around, and it becomes more than an initiative. It becomes a part of the fabric of our world. And I think that that's what I'm learning to do, and what I'm learning to do with other leaders and other communities is learning to really to create change in the world, to bring beauty into our world, and to do it in a way that I think a lot's been forgotten over thousands of years. And I think that once upon a time that we were a lot better at creating together and dreaming together. I think things like the pyramids and the stone circles and like just these vast blocks of rock and wood and just these vast legacy pieces. I think they're a testament to what we've been able to do in the history of humanity. And I'm really curious about what it is to create legacy together now, and to remember a little of how we did those things by just being in the practice of doing it. So for me, these collective initiations are they're like practicing the dreaming. They're practicing, dreaming the world, dreaming our reality together. And I think, in the Piscean age, I don't want to get too complicated here, but in the last 2,000 years, the kind of core theme is this theme of on our own, working it out on our own, the lone wolf, even like individual figures at the top, like the Jesus figure at the top. And now we transition out of the Piscean age into the Aquarian age. And it's more of like there's wisdom in the hearts of all. And there's a need for not just this top down leadership, but also the inspiration in everyone's heart and the wisdom in everyone's heart to come forward, and the alchemy of all those hearts coming together is what creates the world we're dreaming. So we're learning to do that. Yeah. And these collective initiations are a space where we can, they had their individual themes, but on a wider scale, it's opportunities for us to learn to bring our own heart to the table. And as a leader, you could call me, I'm still working out how to hold spaces and communities and fields within which all hearts and the wisdoms inside all beings have a place at the table. I don't think it's not a thing that's been handed down through the generations. It's got lost at some point. So I'm rather than being a master of it, I'm a student learning how to be in this world and how to create and dream in this world. And it's just the adventure of a lifetime, really.
I couldn't agree more. And I will go back to what you said earlier. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. And I love that. And it's the same thing. Like I've spent a lot of time in understanding, cultures from thousands of years ago, not hundreds of years ago, but thousands of years ago, and how they used to operate, in this land and in other lands. And, you talked about the pyramids and the stone circles. I mean, you just got to look at the Mayan, so Mesoamerica, and the amount of what is now they're discovering through all these heat maps and everything else, the extensiveness of, just the buildings and the pyramids and how those things used to actually operate that, you give to any engineer coming out of uni today and he'd have no idea how to start to build. Yeah. But this was thousands of thousands. And they used to have, what people don't understand is that our education system is only a few hundred years old. And it was all based on the Industrial Revolution of we need people to be trained on how to go to a factory 8 to 5 every single day. Well, how do you do that? You start them at school and you do that. And the amount of ancient scripts that have been burnt and destroyed, because in the old days, philosophers would sit around, but they would welcome anyone. And if a young child sat there and questioned or put up questions, they actually saw them as bringing wisdom to the table. Not you are to be sit down in the back and listen to what I've told and, don't question what I'm doing or saying. And so I agree. Like, a lot of our world in the last 2,000 years has been generated by, single figure people, prime ministers, presidents and everything else. And the more we can now get back to collective. The other element too, for me is, I'm learning more and more about this energy connection and how energy works and how we are just all finite, nanoparticles of energy. And for me, this collective initiative is here's this massive, positive, powerful energy group that's coming together. And what we know is that you can, you don't need a lot of people to get together to create this massive, powerful, positive energy that can actually circumvent thousands of people and thousands of negative ions that are out there. And so, that's also where we're going to start to understand. And sorry, I just want to go back to something. My perspective on life is, if I get to live 80 years, that's fantastic. But we've been here for 80 billion years, right? So we got to put life in perspective. Like, what are you waiting for? At which part of this 80 years in this life are you going to make a difference? Like what is it? Do you just going to go through and just be, just the mundane world, and at the end you've done nothing, or what can you do to crack your own armor or find a way to crack your armor? I do want to take a step back because I think as you spoke about, your armor, you found little cracks and you're working through those and we're breaking all that. So when we're born, we don't have armor. Somewhere along our life, we have this, belief systems and conditioning that sort of builds up the armor around us. And then later in life, there's a number of people who realize, hang on a minute, that's not quite right. So can we take a step further back and go, what does that look like for you? And like, what was growing up look like? Were you in a spiritual family? Were you in a non-spiritual? And at what point did you realize, hang on, there is more to my life and I've got more to offer and bring to the table than maybe what I was asked previously?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So there's been so many different like layers of incarnation for me, or layers of like awakening or deeper arrival, or just significant moments, like they're almost like the turning of the page in the chapters of my life. I can almost pinpoint them. Probably my first major one, that's here present with me right now anyway, is at 6, I was the eldest son in a fatherless family. My parents split and my dad went to Papua New Guinea. And so I was the eldest son. And I really, some little piece of my heart, some little part of my being just knew my love for my brothers and knew some kind of like responsibility that I had as just being the big brother, or there was some kind of leadership innate kind of, the who's the oldest in the village? He's the oldest. Okay, pull your weight a little bit, And so for me, what I made that mean was that I just got really curious about what was real in the world. I think as kids we can feel the distortions in the world, the illusion, some call it. We can kind of feel, this isn't quite right. There's, like going through school, for instance, like the stuff they teach you and the way it gets taught. It's like, this 6-year-old me was all over it. He's like, there's something not right here. And so my family as a whole wasn't a particularly spiritual family. They were very impassioned, like a sport family, like the sort that I got taught to rip in. I got taught to like grab the ball and rip it with all my strength. I got taught to like push hard, and I got taught to like find my edges and then explore what's after that, what's after my edges. And yeah, so I was very lucky to be raised in a culture of like bringing all of ourselves to the sporting field. But it was somewhere in that space between bringing all of myself and then also like wanting to question what's real and what's true and what it really means to, what is all this? What, no one's really pulled me aside and taught me what all this is. So I had to get curious myself, and on behalf of my brothers, that was the inspiration. It's like, I've got to I've got to find a way to the truth for us and kind of like lead us to the truth. That was what a 6-year-old me made it mean. Probably not my words at the time, but something like that was in my little heart. And so just that journey of like being inspired and bringing all of myself and having like a deep passion inside me that I brought to all things, and then having this curiosity and this quest for truth. Like those together is what created my kind of early inspiration. And I was lucky. Like I really feel like in some ways it feels like I'm one of the stories where, I was like a wildflower that grew in kind of a swampland, or like in a like there was the passion, but there wasn't much divinity. There wasn't much culture. We didn't listen to music in our house ever, really. I didn't start listening to music until my kind of early mid-teens. And so there was just like this void that I really got to experience, the silence and time a lot of time in my own space as a child. And, but that time in silence and that time in isolation and that time without much sound happening, it did build my relationship with the silence. And it was part of what in the early days taught me to listen to the things that you have to listen really deeply to hear. So yeah, that's a little bit of the beginning story. Are there any pieces that you'd like me to speak to specifically?
I like the element about the silence, because our world today is so distracted, by what's going on. And, I was talking to someone, I actually went and did a sound healing, breathwork session the other day. And, one of the things that I was talking to them about is that I recently we had a massive rainstorm come through, and the tide had come up as well. So tide had come up and the tide was going out. And what had happened is that in between the rainstorms, I went to go for a run. And when I got down to the beach was dimpled, but there's no one on the beach. And so I'm just walking along, just feeling this dimpled sensation on my bare feet, because I'm now been to run bare feet and everything else. So I'm really connecting back in. And then and it just helps me realize that whenever I go for a walk along the beach, how many people are wearing shoes and how many people have got headphones in and how many people are walking. It's okay to walk with someone else, but I just wonder how many people can actually just go and just be present in silence and just be present with the thoughts that are going on in your head, and then be even further present with, how do I remove those thoughts, not ignore them or dismiss them, but how can I actually even go to the point of my thoughts are the sensation on my feet and the crashing of the waves and everything else. So, for you, that silence, it was probably a gift, I would suggest, provided to you at such a young age. Did you see it as that way?
I mean, as a kid, I hated it. It was so lonely. It was so, as is often the case, the caves that we fear or the caves that we least enjoy are the places that hold the treasure that feed us for a lifetime, or inspire us for a lifetime at least. So for me, it really was you could probably, if I had have been diagnosed, you could have put a label of some pretty severe depression,
Right.
that I had to find my way through 4 years of fatherless eldest child without a role model, finding how to be a young man into the world on his own,
Yep.
and it was quite a devastating. I mean, it's a story that's pretty common these days as well. This isn't just my story. It's lots of men's stories, lots of women's stories as well. This idea of having to find our own way in the world. And so I froze. I really froze in some way. And there was the passion. It's all at once for all of us. It's you can be inspired, but you can also be terrified. It all kind of can exist all at once. And so for me as a kid, there was this great sadness and this great longing, and a depression of sorts, but also on the flip side, within that, and it's often the case in a life as well, within the grief is the gold. Within I didn't even know how to suppress my emotions as a kid, to begin with. So it was just grief, just embodied grief a lot of the time. And so somewhere within that grief, there's also, and it's the same for us these days, there's gold, there's treasure, that's why they say go into the wound, don't run from it. And as men, we've got very good, just as a whole, generally, really good at sucking it up, really good. We're the best numbers. We're so good at numbing. We can put a numb something over that wound and pretend it's not there for years. And I learned that as a kid as well, slowly, just in the grief, learning how to get my head above it. But I think I'm still, I continue to, and a lot of us do. I continue to dance with these demons, dance with that journey of what is it to be a human, what is it to be a man, and I have my own senses these days, but I think it's a line of inquiry that just continues to crack the edge. We continue to learn more, we continue to deepen, because we're not just asking the question, what is it to be a man? We're also asking the question, what is it to grow old? What is it to become elder? What is it to deepen into life? And it's such there's so many magical layers to this that I think that our minds can't necessarily work it all out. Sometimes we have to be initiated by the grief. Yes. The grief almost cracks us into a knowing that's deeper than the mind can even make form. And I had that as a kid.
So just on that point then, and you're so spot on, we are the great insulators of emotion. How far can I push it down? And by the way, all the men, if you think you can numb it and push it down, it's going to come back and bite you on the ass at somewhere. That's when all of a sudden you crack up at the guy who pulled out you in the car park. That's when you all of a sudden get angry in the meeting. That's when all these things, you wonder where they come from. It's because this thing found its way up through your numbing process, and your insulation may not have been as good as what you thought it was. And celebrate the fact it came out, right? That's if you're getting those things happen to you, that's the first signal to say, I'm now going to go and talk to other men and see what I can actually do. But back on what you're saying, Matthew, is so how did you work through that? Because as you said, silence can be a gift, but it can also be, as you said, a lot of grieving, everything else. So what have you done to help not be in the suppression mode, and what have you done to help release a lot of those emotions and actually work through a lot of that grief through that period of time?
Yeah, well, I want to begin that by being really real about the fact that I think some of these things are a lifetime journey. I think a lot of, I'm not a clean vessel. I have my moments. I have my moments, but But I also think that there's a maturity in being able to turn towards that and name it. There's a maturity to being I'm I'm in a lifelong unfolding here. I'm in a lifelong alchemizing of this trauma. Often what's happened throughout my life is the greatest pains have been the greatest teachers. And the very things that have caught me, I've spent, get shivers thinking, I've spent just years at a time caught, I call it like the shamanic merry-go-round. It's like being stuck, it's like the stuck in a thought or stuck in an ecosystem of life, a moment in life that I just can't seem to get out of. It just seems like it just has me captured. I'm like caged in this particular chapter of life. And what I learned, maybe this is answering your question in kind of a bit of a mystical way, but what I learned was when I stopped trying so hard to escape the cage and like just try and rip at the iron bars and pull myself out, when I stopped trying to get out of the cage and turn to look at why I was in there in the first place and actually turn my gaze towards the tenderness and the sadness and just an honesty, the honesty, brother, like to turn my gaze towards the honest fact that I was hurting, that my father wasn't a part of my life. It hurt, and it hurt so bad. And I learned honesty. I learned over time, and I've got better the last 5 years in particularly to be honest with myself, and that honesty is what I feel like in itself. There's an alchemy for the fracturing inside me just in being real about it, just in being like, no, I am a bit tender there. And so I've been cracked rather than being cracked into being totally healed. I've been cracked into intimacy with my rawness. And so I'm not healed, I'm raw.
Yes.
That's where I'm at in the story of my life. I'm raw. But the beauty of that rawness is I'm beginning to like touch my soul, because I'm not turning away from the rawness. My soul's beginning to find its way into this world. My poetry's changing. You could almost, if you go and read my poetry or any of my writings the last few years, you can literally see this soul developing itself in the world, coming through, and it's only coming through because I'm turning towards the rawness. I'm turning towards the tenderness, and that's the same as what's been the theme my whole life. Whenever I turn toward the tenderness, whenever I be really not just like look at the wound, but whenever I dive into it, I'm like, I don't want to. This is part of the great alchemies of our time, the somatic processing and the shamanic processing. And whenever I dive into the wound, I find myself like that's a man. That is a man, someone who can dive into the wound and not turn away from it. Now we're starting to that's like the maturing process, to be honest with ourselves about what's inside us. We put so much shame on us. I've put so much shame on myself over the years. Shame. Oh, I'm broken. I'll look away from that. I won't dive into that. But there's something about being able to rest in the wound, trusting that it's alchemizing, just being in there. And so, you have to withstand some pain and some shake and shame and just all the emergent feelings that come with the human experience of the pain. But the result is becoming a being who's honest and becoming a being who women trust, that kids trust. They can feel it. They can feel, this person's not kidding themselves.
That's right.
This person isn't. Yeah, this person. They kind of know that they're a bit tender. One of my lifelong things is that I've had the occasional, and sometimes more than occasional, leaky fire. It continues to get better, but there's been moments where I really I've burnt down some buildings and some friendships and relationships with that fire just kind of leaking a little bit too loudly into the space. And so there was a time when I wasn't present to the leaky fire. I didn't know that I was, bringing so much heat to the exchanges, so much it's almost like overactive passion, really. Like it's a little bit too much. There needs to be a respect for the other being. There needs to be a holding of their experience as well. I didn't know I was being overactive leaky. And then when I learned that that's how I operated, and was one of my like mechanisms, I could just kind of be real about it. And even though it's healing over time, it's alchemizing over time, but it's still here with me, and even though it hasn't fully transitioned out of my life, just by being honest about it and not pretending it's not there, I've become a safer place, a safer space, and it's what embodiment is. There's this journey. The journey of embodiment doesn't mean everything has to be healed. It just means we have to be honest about what is.
Yeah.
And I'm on that journey.
I love that. The thing that came up for me in the background, every night now I've been listening to this 13-minute, I just listened to the audio part of the YouTube, and it's about the 20-second gene key, which is about grace. And one of the things that goes in there is that it's about, every time we're not honest with ourselves, we're actually dishonoring ourselves. Every time we're not taking accountability and responsibility for what takes place in our life, we're dishonoring ourselves. And there's a point where we have to honor dishonor. And I really love that saying, which is you just be honest that you're being dishonest, and don't. And it also says we can't shirk our responsibilities, and we can't shirk our destiny, if you like, or what's playing out for us. And so I agree with you. The embodiment isn't I become embodied when I'm healed. Embodiment is I'm on a healing process. And this process will continue started before this human body was formed, and will continue post when I exit this human body. And so at the deepest level, the soul, I was talking to someone the other day, and I just to trigger their thoughts, because this is a man who's just starting a bit of a journey with me. And I just said to him, who's listening to the person who's anxious? Like, how do you know that you got anxiety? Like, you're telling me, but who's listening to the thoughts in your head? And he's like, oh, hang on a minute. And he just trigged. He's like, I said, yeah, there's someone listening to those thoughts that's not you, because you're aware that you're actually having all these thoughts in your head. That's your deepest soul. And so for me, that's that whole journey about where we can go on and where we can start to work our way through, which is just be open and honest with those interactions. I like your terminology about the leaky fire. I've set up some pretty good bushfires over my period of time with my wife and my kids and other families, everything else sort of thing. The other thing that you touched on, and just to go on, is, things around, we often go into guilt mode or shame mode when some of these emotions come up, or if we want to, just to go back to your example about, being really shitty and pissed off and angry about the fact you didn't have a dad in your life. Now, sometimes we can feel guilt or shame about it, but then we can actually go into the other mode, which is actually go into inquiry mode and compassion mode, but also go, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be disappointed. And in fact, with the right level of compassion and the right level of candor, it's actually okay to go back and approach that person if they end up back in your life, or if you had a torrid relationship with your father and you're a bit estranged and you need to go back. It's okay to go, hey, with all my heart, I love you and I love everything you did for me. You didn't have a rule book, but I fucking hated all of these things that took place in my life when we grew up. Don't get me wrong, they were events, but this is just a clearing exercise. And you'd be amazed, I think, on how the other person responds, because often that releases them from that. They've been carrying a lot of weight and heaviness and guilt themselves because they've remembered a similar event. And so I just want to touch back on that point that you raised, which I think is, I just didn't want to wash over. It's super powerful that it's okay to look back and touch in on that child and go, yeah, I hear you. It's okay for you to be really shitty and angry. And in fact, as this adult, in some cases, in this adult child that I am today, there's the man child, there's the man, and then there's the adult child that I still play out on. It's okay for that to come up, but I'm going to take you on this journey of embodiment and show you love. And for me, the crack is those letting love come into our life and allowing love to come out of our life. And the bigger the crack, the more love can come in and out.
Yeah, I really feel that, mate. I really feel that.
So let's sort of move a bit forward, because as we spoke about earlier, the one thing I'm really noticing, and without leading you, but there feels a connection between maybe, you starting very young as a leader, but feeling this isolation and this levels of silence, and now being a leader of creating these communities. As to, is there a connection between those two? In other words, this is how part of my healing process, because I'm actually creating this as what I didn't have. So I'm bringing this to the table. Plus also what's currently happening in this wonderful world of you gathering all these other, souls that are on a similar journey.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions. So yes, I think I feel it's connected. I feel that for all of us, our pains, like we're all sensory beings. We are all so much more sensorial than we like to pretend that we are. We really are these, our nervous system is just billions of sensory points, engaging our reality. And so we're all all the things that are off or wrong or feel bad, or just our journey through it, a lot of them at least, there are us working out what the world is supposed to be. It's part of the world's evolution as a whole. It's part of the collective evolution, humans, and then just the civilization we build on top of the earth. And so we're supposed to be instructed by this. We're supposed to be led by our experience. We're supposed to, not necessarily just be like, oh, that's how it is, but to listen within what is and be like, oh, this is what could be. I can feel, I don't know about you, but I can feel in my body. I have some distant sense somewhere down there of what it really feels to be a human being in full form, and what it really feels to be a human being in held by an ecosystem and a community of love. And so all the things I experienced as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult, I've taken them to be my instructions in this lifetime. They're my instructions. They're part of the where the creator, if you want to call it creator, where creator has turned my gaze and said, this is the way this is your challenges. Go work out how to bring them to the world in a different way. And so by being in the challenge, I've got to be really intimate with what you could call what isn't fully formed in the world. And so my being gets to devote my life in some ways to the alchemy of those within the greater field. So short answer is, I think that our challenges inform who we are here to be. Yep. And it's some of the clearest instructions we can get is what has been brutally hard for us in this lifetime. And then what would it look like if it wasn't like that? How would that not be for the next generation or for 7 generations for now? And so, especially as men and as fathers and as grandfathers, and even if not men who have their own children, but as fathers of all, men who take on the role of a holding and a leadership of the generations on earth right now, but also they know their responsibility for the future generations. That's the winks and the emerging elder stuff that I'm holding point for now as well. The difference between being a leader and being an emerging elder or an elder, just a slight different consciousness shift to how we hold the generations. So yeah, my journey and my challenges and tensions inform where I take the world. But often also, it's not just that I try to solve the problem. It's also that just naturally by being in the hardness of the grief and the hardness of the shame, the hardness of the isolation, just in that field of heart challenge and tension, often that's where I find my greatest gifts. Like in the last couple of years in the isolation COVID times and pandemic-y times and or whatever the hell that was. Anyway, there was isolation. That was a fact. I spent a lot of time, just me and my partner at the time, in a 5-bedroom country town house on 100 acres, just away from everyone else. Like a lot of the time was spent in the distance. But in that time, I learned to play the didgeridoo. In that time, my poetry deepened. In that time, I lit candles way more than I put lights on. And so there was just some remembering within the isolation. And I think this is the case for all of our wounds or challenges, is that within them, there's a remembering. And so now I get to bring those rememberings out here as well, like remembering poetry, remember candles, I'm like standing for it in the field. Remember poetry, remember candles, remember, and this is one of the groups that we've just formed recently, is an Earth Altar group where I think we've got in our first month, I think 2,200 people have joined from all over the world. And I think
amazing.
We're close to 5 in the first 6 weeks, 500 altars being made, so just altars being, we call them earth altars. And they are, the invitation essentially is for people to go out and make art on the earth with Mother Nature, with sticks and twigs and leaves. And sometimes people use rocks, or they bring crystals, or it can be as woo-woo or as simple as anyone likes. On the woo-woo scale, people can create portals that are like prayers of intention, of change, and they seed it into the geometry of the earth altar, and it's like creating a spell on the earth. Boom, love, change, boom, there it is on the earth. And at a more simple level, it's just getting our hands dirty and getting our hands into the matter of nature and touching twigs and having a reason. We need reasons, we need context. That's what culture is. And in the West, we've lost our culture a bit, but culture gives us context. The context of go out and get your hands on twigs and leaves and sticks and rocks and make a shape in the ground and just be with the earth and be with the twigs and the sticks for a bit, and something happens when we turn our gaze in that direction. When we get our hands a bit dirty, something happens inside us. And so there's a group, there's 2,200 people in it. We've created 500-ish altars, earth altars, all around the world: India, Costa Rica, North America, Taiwan, Australia, the UK, Scotland, Wales, Germany, Russia. There's just altars landing all over the world. And it's like I said at the beginning of this chat, it's both a beautiful project on its own, and at the same time, it's part of this wider learning of how to dream together. How do these beings all over the world cast spells into the earth, or put their prayers into the earth? And it's just us. It's like a line of inquiry as well that teaches us how to do beautiful things in this world. And you know what? It's not, it's not as big a jump as we think from 500 altars all over the world to 500 stone circles all over the world. And right. I'm just intrigued about that. I'm intrigued about that space and what's possible.
Yeah. And that's so awesome, because for me, each of those 2,200 people and 500 altars are just energetically connected. And again, I'll just continue to go back to that. We are all made up of the same thing. Doesn't matter whether you're a stick, a rock, a human, a bird, a dog. It doesn't matter. We actually, when you break it down, we're all made of the same thing. And it's effectively something like 99.9997 of that is air. And it's just lots of these little things vibrating really quickly that gives us a perception of me as a human, and that is a dog, and this is a tree, and everything else, because that's how we collectively see things. And so we have the ability to collectively change the energy of how we see things and how we come out the back. And to you, I think you've touched on a couple of times. What I feel has happened in the last few years, and this is what my perception around things, and so for what I'm feeling is real for me, is that the universe itself is the great guider of all of us. Call it creator or whatever person that you want to put on top, but ultimately the events had to take place because we was getting sicker and sicker and sicker as a world and as an energy source, and that was doing us damage. And so something had to come in. Now, whether you want to whether you go, that was a bad thing from an illness point of view, whether you go, that was an evil thing from a whole lot of, warlords that have got this secret sect going together, whichever angle and rabbit hole you came from. For me, it doesn't make any difference. It's about the fact that we got a message very clearly from a universe around overpopulation, overmaterialization, overconsumption, and we were slowly destroying it. And there's an awakening out of the back of that that's taking place, which is around, do I really need all these things? Do I really need to operate this way? Have I spent 2 years, I was energetically and emotionally disconnected. Then I got physically disconnected, and that was the thing that frightened the shit out of me. Now I'm realizing that I have to come back and find a way to reconnect with people again and actually build these, as you said, moving out of the Piscean into the Aquarius is around, going from the single, I'm okay on my own and I can do all this, to, hey, actually, maybe I needed to start to reconnect with people and see them face to face and have some gratefulness for the fact that we can get to touch and feel and be with other people. And I sort of see, that there is some great stuff that's going to be happening moving forward on the basis that we still continue to have faith in the fact that we need these altars and we need people to connect. And if you call it woo-woo and you go, these people are weird and these people, you have to listen to this and everything else. My question is, what is your limiting belief system that's actually creating you to have that thought process? Like what education system, what family system, what background has led you to go, I'm just so against this, or I don't believe in it? Why would you not believe in it? Why could it not be true? And really do some deep inquiry as to where that is, and then reach out to someone who does have an openness to it and inquire of them. Why are you so open to it? Were you always that open? And you'll find most people went through a process where their heart got open, the armor got cracked open, and they started to see there is other opportunities out there. So,
can I speak into that for a moment?
You please do.
Yeah, I feel like a really important point in the journey of it all is when we get to, and I think we should get to this point over and over again in a lifetime as well. It's a point where we ask ourselves, what's the worst that could happen? Like when we go, what's the worst that could happen if I jumped outside of my existing reality for a moment, or if I fully immersed myself in something different, and it's fully across the board in all directions. Some things are going to raise us up. Other things are going to be like, nope, we're not going there again. But I think that there's this common thread of getting stuck in our own ways, or stuck in our own world, or stuck in our own limiting beliefs, our own thought trains, we kind of almost imagine an ecosystem in our world, a cage of our own minds. And for me, I've had a few moments where I've had to get to, and I've let myself get to, what's the worst that could happen if I did this thing that I had made wrong, or I had thought they were crazy, or I thought that was silly or something, or an example of that is like sitting with shamans and sitting in ceremonies, and I'd made that wrong a lot of my life. But in sitting with shamans and medicine ceremonies, as an example, there was a remembering that happened inside me. There was a remembering of the world beyond the mind. That's what I kind of got to go, hold up, there's finally some support to get me out of this kind of like mind cycle that I'm in. So I think that there's something really powerful about that moment of what's the worst that can happen. And I think that this is what, if we're in an age where we're really working out, like I like to think of us as like toddlers or teenagers. It's a transitional stage that we're in as a collective and as human beings. And so really the warriors of our age are the explorers who are prepared to hop outside of their limiting beliefs and explore beyond that, who are prepared to put their bodies and their lives into a different space or into a different experience to see if that transmits something, because we're exploring what it means to be human. And whatever we've been doing has created the world in its current form. So there's this invitation, or the civilization anyway, there's this invitation to explore what it really means to be human, because out of that, those learnings, is going to come new civilization, is going to come, maybe one way you could say it is more beauty, more sustainability, more working together, more, a bit of a more mature humanity comes out of those explorations. So yeah, when I got to what's the worst that could happen, it became an adventure, because I'm going outside of my own bounds. I'm going outside of my own understanding to a place, and that's what we need often to crack the cycle, is to go into something that we don't understand or that we can't quite grab with our minds. And yes, that moment of what's the worst that can happen is a blessing. I almost invite anyone who's and whether that's working with a mentor or a coach, or finding their way to ceremony, or finding their way to elders or fires with other cultures, or for some people it's finding their way to particular spiritual or religious practice, or just whatever the beautiful moment is, the revelationary moment. It's finding their way to that space only happens outside of the what's the worst that can happen, and then the path begins, the journey begins, the adventure begins from there.
I really love that. And, for the people listening out there who've either known me personally or, have got to know me, if I was to label myself 15 odd years ago, cynical, alcoholic, carnivore, ignorant, and that's just where I lived, I had no completely shut down, and full, just a big heavy armor wrapped around me. And so, now if people know me, I'm now a hugger, attending ceremonies, going through, doing energy healing like kinesiology, and tapping into all of these things. And, and what's the worst thing that could happen to me? Oh my God, the worst thing that's happened to me so far is I am so in love with the world and so in love with everything around me. Again, you spoke about on the beach the other morning, I'd gone for a swim and I was walking back along the beach, and the way there's some clouds, but the sun just had shone down through the clouds, and it was one of the most beautiful things. I mean, there's beauty everywhere, but it was just amazing. And I was actually just emotional about it. And my view was that if ever I needed a reason to think about a great creator and how beautiful this earth is, it was just there in front of me. And it just tapped straight into my heart. It just tapped, and as you said, I just felt it. There's an energy being connection that took place, not this physical mind going, oh yeah, well it's the rays coming down because of the clouds and all these sorts of just you'd gone out of your head and into your heart. And so if anyone trust me, it's possible. You've just got to, you just let it go, slowly let it go, and nothing. Most cases, in fact, in every situation of mine, nothing bad has ever come out of anything where I've stepped into that new realm. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
You've been very generous with your time today, Matthew, so I appreciate that. As I wrap up, is there just something that you would like? I mean, I could grab multiple pieces out of this great conversation we've had, but is there something you'd just like to say, and in particular men, because men are the ones with the hardest shells and they wrap themselves up. So is there any particular message for men that you would say, hey, guys, just have a bit of a think about this as we're wrapping up?
Yeah. Just it's what's on my heart at the moment, and it's what my journey is kind of guiding me towards. And it's more just that, it's more of a question than an answer. But the question is, what is the difference between being a man who is a leader and being a man who is an emerging elder? Being a man who is a leader and being a man who is a chief. Being a man who is a leader and being a man who is truly in relation with the community. And the difference between a man who is a leader and a man who is an emerging elder. And there's just something there. There's a remembering at a community, at a relational, at a family kinship level. There's a remembering of custodianship and a responsibility and a mature manhood that hasn't been modeled to us very much in this world. And I feel that we are part of generations on Earth right now that are, well, I mean, one of the ways to put it is I believe that shortly we will have the first generation of something like initiated elders for the first time in 500 years. It's the first generation of something like initiated elders that will be coming through. So the elders are going to have a voice soon. Like they're going to be back in the communities. They're going to, like, the reverence is returning. And so, as men, we are on our own path to having to ripening our voice and ripening our wisdom and ripening our embodiment and coming just deeper into our manhood. And it's just okay to learn. It's okay to know that there's something more than what's been modeled to us in the world. And I think it's such an adventure to begin to explore what it really means to be a man, what it really means to be love, what it really means to walk in this world as a mature man. It's been such a extraordinary question I've been asking in one way or another since I was 6 years old. And I think I'm experiencing it changing me at a cellular level. And I'm experiencing something in my being and in my body that feels like a kind of love that is a part of the human experience. I don't think we've felt in our communities and our families and our tribes in this way for a very long time. And I just love to invite the men to remember that love, to remember this extraordinary depth of embodied love that we all have. It presents itself as a custodianship, as a responsibility, but also as an innocence, and also as a courage to not just be strong, although yes, but also to be open. Courage to be strong and open all at once. And that what they used to call it, the soft belly and the strong spine. Soft belly for men who have soft bellies and strong spines. And that, if we can remember that, then I think that we are a generation of elders that will be very important and just in the great story of the human unfolding. There's within this great remembering. Soft belly, strong spine, journey well, brothers.
I love it. Just to link two things that you've said along the path into leadership versus eldership, and for me, and mate, correct if I get the interpretation wrong, but for me, it's a leader's probably looking at the current generations. An elder is looking at the 7 generations ahead. So a leader is looking in the now, and yes, I can lead men and I can lead people today. But am I actually thinking, as an elder is actually seeing, what does the world look like for the 7th generation? And then when that next elder comes along, what's the 7th generation? And from memory, that's really big in the Lakota tribes and that through North America, they're always going, my legacy is for 7 generations, not for the now. And so thank you for that message. I think that was super powerful.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I'll just add to that to me, it feels like being connected to all that's been, all the ancestors, the entire family line. The moment you bring the ancestors and the family line into it, and we really think, oh no, we're kind of the arrow tip of our ancestors. We are the living leaders of our family line. There's something in that. There's something that goes back to the very beginning in that. And then, like you said, custodians of the future. So we're listening to what's been, we're being led by that, guided by that, but also infusing our own souls and the things that have never been into the moment as we move forward. What we need to do is definitely listen backwards as we move forwards and be custodians of the moment. And also, it's like you said, 7 generations down the track. And that is the emerging elder for sure. That's the elder. That's the one that they rest into the moment, and they are there as a representative of all that has been and all that is yet to come.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm going to close out on that because there's nothing I can add into any of that at all. So, Matthew, thanks for your time today. It's everything I thought this chat would actually be. As I said, I've never had a chance to actually meet you. This is our first chance to have a bit of a chat. I've been witness to this journey over the few years because, again, part of my opening up was then opening up to a different group of people that I would not normally have connected to in my previous world. And, just watching how everyone goes and what they're doing just continually inspires me. And, that question about, what harm could come of this, or, what could be the worst could come out of doing this. It's just a great thing because I see what you're doing. I'm like, cool. There's a man who I'm just being inspired by. He's living in his truth. He's honoring who he is. And by doing that, that's like, cool. That's to almost, not that I need permission, but it provides permission for other men to go, I can also stand into that space. And I think, the more men like yourself who truly do show that, as there's words and then there's actions, and I see the actions all the time. So I've loved the chat. It's been awesome. You take care of yourself, my brother. You keep doing this solid work. I'm really looking forward to staying connected with you and seeing where you continue to emerge as an elder, for your tribes and for other tribes out there as we move forward. So have a great day, and we'll definitely be chatting to you again soon.
Thank you, mate. Till next time.
Cheers, brother. Hey all, so that was such a great chat. Like, I absolutely loved it. It was just an awesome chat. So, if you're looking to catch up with Matthew at any point in time, you can definitely just search for Matthew Liam Gardner on any of the social media. I do notice most of his stuff's over on Facebook. He's probably not as active on Instagram, but certainly over on Facebook. But yeah, reach out to him if you are inspired to go and create one of the 501st, the 502nd, the 727th altar. I'm sure he'd love to have you part of the tribe and creating these altars around the world. So jump on and reach out to him. So that's going to be a bit of a wrap for us today. I'm just going to let you go. I would suggest it's an episode to go back and listen to twice because there was so much deepness within that. Go back over it again, and I certainly will be doing the same. So I'm going to wrap up. That's episode 58 of the Unearthed Man Podcast. This is Stephen sending you much love, care, and peace. Have a great day.